Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Don't forget to click like and subscribe. Today's topic is on separation of powers and checks and balances. So the goal today is we are going to go over how our powers in our national government are separated and how they check and balance each other. So that I tried to put a little outline on the thing here. I don't know if you like this little circle or if we are going to go with something else moving forward. Make sure you mark in the comments one way or the other, or if anyone has any questions. Remember, if you have any questions, let Taylor know. She'll send me a group message probably, or an email, and I will try to do a little video answering any questions you might have. So we are, once again, talking about separation of powers and checks and balances. And once again, I might go too quickly and also say once again too many times, but we will get there, right? Okay, separation of powers. We're going to start with that. So the separation of powers is as I wrote on here as well, it's a structural safeguard. It is a way for our government to chop up how we exercise the power vested in the constitutional government. Now, to protect us from power, we tend to divide it. To exercise power, we have to unite it. So that's the idea behind separation of powers, is how do we protect the people from the government? We do that by dividing up who can do what. And then for them to do anything, they sort of have to get together and do things together. So it's a way to limit that power of what our government can and can't do and how quickly it can do something like that. So of course, our power is divided up into three branches, each which is operating independently of each other, although there is also some dependency because to accomplish anything, they have to do stuff together. But they are independent. They are, of course, our legislative branch, which is our Congress. They are our lawmakers. They make the laws that our government follows. The executive, of course, is our enforcing branch. It's not police, it's not fire. We tend to think of that, like I said in the previous one, that's who enforces laws, but it's really the execution and carrying out of laws that's done by the president or our executive. Laws by nature are skeletal. They say the ultimate goal is to do X, and it's really the executives, and even if we go down all the way down to police officers, who flush out what those laws mean and how they're going to be carried out. So the president, that's what they do. They take a law that's passed by Congress, they determine what agency is supposed to enforce that law, what funding they're going to use to enforce that law, and what is the standard to do that. Now, if Congress doesn't like that, they can tweak things, but that is the steps on what the executive does in his capacity. The final branch, of course, is the judicial branch, which is our interpreting laws branch. Their job is to take the law that was passed and interpret what it means in relation to the Constitution. They don't look at if the law is good or bad, or good for people or bad for people. Their job is really to take that law and determine if that law conforms to what the Constitution is, because the Constitution has created a limited government. So that Constitution sets forth the principles that our government is supposed to function on. So if a law gets passed and it is not based upon that document, then that's where the Supreme Court comes in and says that law is unconstitutional. They interpret it and apply it to different situations. In a way, that's sort of how we justify implied powers or the elastic laws as well. The courts usually affirm, yes, you do have that power. We do imply or stretch the Constitution to fit that. Now, they don't just do it automatically. The judicial branch can only interpret laws that are brought before them, which is where the whole legal system comes into play, and people who create lawsuits. The idea, if you're trying to get that accomplished, is you need to get that law before the Supreme Court for the ultimate decision. And it's by doing that we determine if that law is constitutional or not. It's not just when the law is passed, the court makes a decision. It actually has to reach them and gets them. Okay, so these three branches is how we separated our powers into those things. And you have a Federalist paper that you are going to be reading that justifies why they thought that was a good idea. Now, of course, that allows for independence because those things are split. Now, our system of government is based on compromise. For any of the branches, or how we've separated powers, for any of them to accomplish anything, they have to compromise. For a law to get passed, compromise. For a law to get passed and signed, compromise. Compromise is if Adam Smith says that competition is the key to capitalism, compromise is the key to our system of government. No one is ever supposed to get exactly what they want. They're supposed to compromise. The only time when compromise isn't necessary is when the need is so drastic that all of society really wants it. And so it can move quickly and it can unite us towards a common thing. But other than that, no one is supposed to get everything they want. There are competing interests. We read in Federalist 51, you read in other things, that idea of a balance between a majority and a minority. Like, how do you protect the minority from a majority? How do you ensure that the majority gets what they're trying to get and not at the expense of the minority? And that's where the separation of powers and our checks and balances come in. The idea is to force compromise in order to achieve our goals, right? So that's part of it. Now, the other part of it is checks and balances. So we just got to look at that term again, checks and balances. Now, a lot of times we take that idea and we say, okay, it's one word or one concept, checks and balances, but it's really two separate things. The idea of checks, meaning to prevent another branch from doing something or to influence what that other branch does, and balance on how to balance the competing interests in society against each other so that one part of the society doesn't get more sway over government than the rest. So we're going to look at them sort of separately, and we're going to start with checks. So a check is like I said, the ability of a branch of government to stop or limit or restrain or delay what the other branches of government do. Or it's a way for them to be involved in that process. Like, you can't do this without me. I have to be involved in some form. Now, a lot of times this happens in a routine fashion. No one questions it. Somebody does something, and then the other branch does something else, and we just continue on and on. Sometimes it causes a stir, and there might be some current events that show how these separation of powers and these checks are sometimes coming under strain. But it normally and historically has happened in a pretty routine in a routine manner, because we are used to sharing powers. This is not a new system of government for us when it comes to that. So what are checks that the president can do? Okay, so that's this next section here. I don't care how you want to do it. Odds are it's going to be something on a test like name 2 checks of this and 2 checks on that. Now, I organized it this way so that you can see that the president does these actions, and then these are who they affect. So we've got, like, a president has to approve all laws. They have to sign them for them to become law. Other than that, they're just a bill. Only a bill. Sometimes they sit on Capitol Hill, but they are only a bill. Now, that is a check on Congress. Congress can pass laws, but Congress can pass bills. They don't actually become laws unless the president signs them. So that's a check on them. That makes the president have to be involved in this process. Now, he can approve them, and I say he because historically we haven't had a she yet, so he. They also can veto a congressional law. And once again, that's a check on Congress. So he can approve it or he can not approve it. Now, if we were just to stop there, that's a lot of power for the president to have. So we're going to see that Congress has a check on those powers as well. Okay? So it's not, no one really has an absolute check on the other branches. There's a way to get around it. But normally what happens is you'll see is the bar gets set a little higher. So if to approve a law is just a signature, for them to say, no, we don't need your approval, that measure or threshold is going to be higher. Now, the president, when it comes to the judicial branch, he names all the federal judges. So there's no elections to federal judges. He gets to appoint, it's called appoint, federal judges, meaning from the Supreme Court all the way down to district courts. That's his prerogative. He gets to say, I nominate this person for this position. That's a check on the judicial branch. He gets to decide who's in the judicial branch. However, although he gets to decide who's in it, he doesn't get the power to get rid of them. So once they're in, somebody else has to get them out. So he can't fire the judges. He can't do what's called impeachment. We'll get into impeachment when we get to the president, actual president unit later. But essentially, impeachment is a two-step process. You bring up charges, and then you vote to remove. So the president doesn't have that ability. He puts them in, but can't take them out. Sort of good, right? The guy who appoints you, once you're appointed, really doesn't get a say if you get to keep your job or not. So that means you're not necessarily beholden to the guy who picks you. You might be initially, but once you're in, they can't hold anything over you. Now, Congress is our next section here. Now, Congress, it sort of has an internal check. Anything that happens in Congress has to be done and run through both the House and the Senate. Now, some things can be approved by the House and started there, but for anything to actually get accomplished outside of Congress, they need each one to work together. So they sort of serve on a check on themselves, which is a benefit of a bicameral legislature. Now, looking at the president, they can override his veto. So if he signs it, they're not going to get rid of it, of course, because that's what they wanted. However, if he vetoes or says, no, I don't approve, he doesn't have an absolute one. He has the ability to veto it, but then Congress, with a 2/3 vote, can override that veto. Now, for a law to pass, normally it's just a majority. And it's a majority of the people there, well, it's a majority, not a majority of people there, but it's a majority, right? But this requires a 2/3 vote. So the threshold is much higher for someone to override, for Congress to override the veto. And so that's a check on the president. They can refuse to provide funds for the president. So we didn't really talk about this in the other area because I guess sort of it's a check. The president can choose to carry out a job well or not carry out a job well, depending upon what gets passed. He gets to enforce the laws that get passed. So if he really doesn't like it, or if he really doesn't want to enforce it, he doesn't allocate funding to do that. He just requests less money to do that. You know, I'm securing, let's just say, the playground, but I can do that with a lot of fence or no fence. It depends on my budget. And that budget is determined by Congress. So Congress can give him more funds to enforce the law more, or they can withhold funds to cause him to not do things a certain way. So if they don't want regulatory things on the environment, they reduce funding when he requests it for, like, the Environmental Protection Agency. Or if they want that to be done more, then when they do the budget, they give the Environmental Protection Agency more money. The government runs sort of like student groups. Our clubs on campus, if they want to spend money, they have to ask for a purchase order. Well, that's sort of requesting, like in this case, the club is the president and the school is Congress. The purchase order is sort of a requisition for a budget, right? Please allow us or authorize us to spend this amount of money on this item. We have the money to do it. Please give us the permission to do that. And so that's what a purchase order does, and that's what I'm talking about when we do about providing funds. Now, the Senate, so part of Congress, the Senate has to approve treaties, which is an agreement between different countries. Now, the president can ask for an agreement with a country. They can do it in one of two ways. They can do it by the United States of America requesting an agreement with Canada. And that's a treaty, and that would have to be run through Congress, and the Senate has to approve that. Now, another way they can do an agreement between a country is through what's called an executive agreement. Now, I don't have that written down here, but we'll get to it at some point. But an executive agreement is not between the United States and Canada. An executive agreement, as the name sort of implies, is between the executives of two countries. So it would be Trump and Trudeau. And it's only in force once or as those two people are in office. And then it needs to be renewed as an executive agreement if there was a change in leadership. Okay, now those do not have to be approved by the Senate. Only treaties between countries. Now, Congress doesn't get to pick the judges, but they have to approve or what's called confirm judges to the Supreme Court or any justices. They also do it to the cabinet, but I don't want to get into that today. Okay, they can remove judges through the process of impeachment, and that's a check on the judiciary as well. They can also check the judiciary. The judiciary's job says, okay, that law is unconstitutional. Well, Congress can propose an amendment to the Constitution in order to make that law constitutional. Now, that's a roundabout way in a very complicated process, but it is possible that the way Congress can check the judicial branch from declaring their laws unconstitutional is that they can create an amendment to the Constitution, get it ratified by the states, and now suddenly all of that stuff is now constitutional. However, that's usually not what's going to happen. A lot of times what's going to happen is the law will just be tweaked in order to try to make it constitutional. If they can do that, much simpler process, okay? But they can propose an amendment. Now, the courts. The main task of the courts is to decide whether, like I said before, whether something is constitutional or not. They can do that with laws, and they can do that through executive orders. So an executive order, which causes the government to function in a certain way, can also be declared unconstitutional, as an example. And it's an extreme example. So let's just go with it just to prove a point, right? If the president instructs park rangers to detain all individuals through an executive order for national parks, since he runs the Department of the Interior and so for national parks. So if he said, okay, we automatically arrest anyone with an open fire in the national park. Well, the Supreme Court can take that action if someone's sued and declare that that action is unconstitutional. So it can be for executive orders, which are orders the president instructs the government to do stuff with, or it can be laws. Now, that's for both actions, okay? That's pretty much it. They don't have a lot of checks because they have like an ultimate check. The only way to get around a check of the courts is to do a constitutional amendment, to tweak the law, which means you cave, or, sorry, I had to drink something. Or I guess you could ignore it, right? They have no ability to enforce themselves. So I guess Congress, if the president's on board, Congress can just ignore anything that they do, or the president can too. But like I said, this stuff is usually routine, and so this would naturally happen. This is what our government does and functions. So overall, the separation of powers, the idea behind that is that it keeps the branches' eyes on each other. It prevents overstep. It causes that one branch can't get too more powerful than the rest. The other branches can hold them in check and require that they involve them or compromise. That's what the whole system has done. We moderate what governments accomplish in our country. We talked about that. So that's just checks. Now, the term is checks and balances. So how do we get to the balance part of it? Well, the best way I can show you that, because we can talk about intangibles. We can say that balances occur because you can't go too far without the other person. So you have to bring the teeter-totter back into balance, right? We can say that way, or the scale back into balance. If you go overstep, they apply their weight to bring you back into that, right? Actually, a circle doesn't work well for me to use my hand signals. Okay, sorry. We'll figure it out. But balances, I want to look at it in the sense of how do we protect the government from each other? And in a way, how do we protect the government from us, the people? And how do we prevent the people who collectively are not very smart, individually are very smart, but collectively we tend to get wrapped up in the momentum of things. As a group, you see this all the time. When people when they win sporting events, they rush the field. When they, or they tear down goalposts, or people win championships and then they decide, hey, in the moment, let's destroy a city street. Okay, let's Godzilla this place, right? We don't make a lot of good decisions when we're in mass. Large groups tend to behave in a way that individuals wouldn't. And so when you look at the size of the United States, our founders sort of got that. They said, okay, we need a way to prevent the president from abusing Congress. We need a way for the Supreme Court to not abuse the president. But we sort of need a way for the government to not abuse its citizens, but also for its citizens not to get swept up in the moment and to destroy the government in a way. And I don't mean destroy in one sense, but I really mean government is there to moderate things and compromise. It is there to delay. It's not meant to work efficiently. Our government is meant to take time and deliberation to do anything so that we don't rush into anything. So how does it prevent a popular impulse that a majority wants right now, but might not want a year from now, from automatically happening? Because once it does, it's very hard to roll back. That's where balance is coming. So to look at this, we want to look at our original system, okay? So let's use as an example, we need somebody in class. I'll look around, look around, look around. Parker's too easy. No one would believe that. Tarapa. Tarapa? Nah, we won't do. Mallory. Mallory wants to take over the United States. Okay? She is popular. A lot of people believe in what she says. She is very motivating. People want to follow her and make sure that she can accomplish all that she wants to do. Well, our system of government is created to delay a popular impulse from happening. And it's done this way. If you look at this chart, how our system was set up was we need to create our government so that nothing really coincides. That the terms for our different areas of government are staggered so that not everything aligns in one particular election. In addition to that, we're going to create a mode of election for each of those things that are completely different. Not one section of our government is going to be the same as the other ones, the mode of election. So if you look at this chart here, we've got the House, the Senate, the President, the Supreme Court. Their terms are, of course, the House is 2 years. The Senate is 6 years. Now, this is sort of a asterisk, right? 1/3 elected every 2, okay? When they originally set up the Senate, what they did is they staggered the elections so that everyone served a 6-year term, but every 2 years, 1/3 of the Senate would come up for re-election. So therefore, the entire Senate wouldn't come up for re-election every 6 years. Once again, the balance system, right? Mediate popular impulses. Mediate the segments of the population so that a majority impulse at a particular moment of time can't change fundamentally how our government functions. So that's why the Senate is set up for every 6 years, where you're only doing 1/3. Now, additionally, a state cannot have both senators up for re-election at the same time. Why? Balance. Right? So back in the day, this is originally, our Constitution said that senators are going to be chosen by the state legislatures. That the House was going to be chosen by the people at large, and we're going to put those people actually in districts. Okay? So we're not going to do a general election for the entire state. We're going to say, okay, the Arizona gets X number of people. We're going to carve up Arizona into those number of districts. So if it was 9, then we'd carve up Arizona into 9 districts. If it was 11, 11. If it was 53, 53. Then the people that live in that area will choose the representative that goes to Congress for that. So not only are we balancing it for the people to choose this, we're also subdividing the people into different areas in order to allow them a voice, but only for their particular area. So Mallory, when it comes to this, has to take that into account when she wants to create her own state to do something. I don't know what she wants to do. What do you want to do, Mallory? That sounds good. Let's work with that. Okay, so the president, once again, the president is 4-year terms. And this body that's going to be created out of the Constitution was a special group. Originally, it was supposed to be this special group. We know that's not necessarily the case, but under the Constitution, the idea behind the Electoral College was that you take the best and brightest people of every state. Former statesmen, former Revolutionary War heroes, former government officials, the Alexander Hamiltons, the George Washingtons, the John Adams of the world, the Thomas Jeffersons of the world. You take them, and then you take the wealthy financial people who have a bunch of businesses in the state, so like Basha, Amazon, those kind of people. And then you take former state government people, and out of that pool, you create an electoral college. And that electoral college can be very, the size of which depends upon your state. Now, that electoral college was supposed to meet, and then they were supposed to choose 2 people they thought that would be a good president. One of which had to be someone outside of their own state. So that meant that states had to communicate with each other, and you had to get to know people that did good things somewhere else. Then, the last one was the Supreme Court. These people serve for life. Now, we've already used people, we've already used the states, we've already created a fictitious body of well-respected people. What was left? So the government decided that what was left was the national government. So the president, both parts, the other 2 branches, had to get together in order to determine who was going to be in the Supreme Court. And that's why those mode of elections are all different, is because we needed people, state legislatures, electoral college, and the national government, all to create this balanced system. So let's go back to Mallory. Mallory wants to take over the world. She's very popular. So let's say she gets organized together. For her to have some level of influence in the government, she needs to take control of a majority in the House of Representatives. Let's create a party, insert party here. So let's take that party. So we have that party, and Mallory's going to use that party as a new 3rd option besides Republican and Democrats. And she starts running people for the House of Representatives. Well, it's not that easy. She has to make sure she has enough support in a majority of districts. And the number of districts are, I'll have a way to do it. We'll write it down here. The number of districts we have are 435. There's 435 districts in the United States. She has to create support in a majority of them to try to get her candidates elected. So let's say she works on that. Is it going to take 2 years? No, it's probably going to take more than that. But let's say she's super popular. And suddenly she sweeps up her Tic Tacs and her Instas are lit up. And she has a lot of followers on her YouTube channel, which I don't have on mine. And she's able to get people elected in 2 years. It's a sweeping movement. She seizes control of the House. There's a problem. She can't get anything accomplished just controlling the House. She can cause things to not happen, but she really can't get things to happen. So now she needs to take control of the Senate. Well, let's assume she was popular in those 2 years, and that in addition, she was able to influence state legislatures to a point. This is the original system, right? To influence, because she was so popular across the United States, she was able to influence 33 senators to also be part of her party. Well, that's not a majority in the Senate either. So she's going to have to wait. So her ideas have to carry over more than one election. So she has to remain popular, and we know the people's attention span is not very great as a collective, that she has to maintain this support over 2 years. And then she has to do it all again. She has to get a majority in every district in the United States of America, a majority to have a majority of seats in the House. Hold on, she already has 33. She's got to pick up an additional at least 17 or 18 if she took all of them. If not, the most she could have is 66. So let's assume she gets 2/3 of that. She's just barely holding on a majority, maybe. Okay? And that means that she has to have sway in the state legislatures. Well, now she has control. Let's say that happens. So maybe we're 4-6 years in. Okay? Now, she needs to have the presidency because they can pass laws, but she probably only has majority, so she can't override vetoes. So she needs now the president. The president is every 4 years. So if you don't get it in the first one, you got to wait another 4 years. So now your Mallory's takeover event has to maybe last 8 years for her to do it. And not only that, she's got to find the wise people in every state and get their support to be in, so that when they go to the electoral college, they vote for her for president, assuming she's the one that wants to be president. The really smart takeover person would use someone as a puppet, so they never know it's you pulling the strings. But let's assume that Mallory's going. Okay, so Mallory does that, right? She tries to talk behind closed doors. She tries to get the support and all of that stuff. And she's able to sway enough electoral college people. Well, now it's probably 6 to 10 years. While she's doing that, she also needs to continue to have the support in the House and the state legislatures. So now she's taking control of the Senate, the House, and the presidency. Problem: Supreme Court. Yes, maybe they can do impeachment, but one would hope that the population are like, well, you can't just remove people just because you don't like them. But let's say that happens. Those people serve for life, so you can only really fill vacancies. What I'm trying to get at is, you can see it's complicated. She's going to have to sustain this drive and momentum over multiple years. And if it's something that the people really want, then yes, it will be sustained, and she will be able to do that. Because if people wanted it over that long period of time, it's probably something the United States should do, or that's what the United States is really looking for at the time, the people who live here. And government's supposed to reflect our views. However, it's not necessarily supposed to reflect our impulses. Now, that's original. What has happened to our balance system since then? This is where we get a little tied up in the founders wanted something to mediate or moderate our impulses. But our current system doesn't necessarily do that. So our current system is still in place. People in districts elect people in the House. However, this got changed. The 17th Amendment to the Constitution changed this to people statewide. So the reason why it was set up this way is so that one segment of the population doesn't have as much say, as more say than any other segment. But now we have the people and people. Yes, it's more democratic, but is it necessarily more Republican sense, or is it more balanced? I don't know. So we did that. Then, almost initially from the bat, the Electoral College survives. But how it was supposed to function didn't. Instead of the wise body of people, the Electoral College essentially became a way for parties to pick the president. Electoral College delegates became supporters of a political party. And so when you vote on election day that I want this person as president, you're really voting for a group of people who said, if you pick this guy or this girl, I promise to support them. And so the Electoral College is run by parties based upon a popular vote. You vote, the people vote for president, and they use that information to send delegates to the Electoral College. So really, in the end, this is also, I don't have room over there, but let's just do over here, also people. So you can see how our balance system has changed. Originally, it was balanced by mediating popular impulses, but now it's very much the people. Very democratic, very way for people to have a say in what government does. But it also opens the door to possibly majority factions, minorities being abused, not minority as in a group, minority in the sense of if people say it's red and people say it's green, how do we make sure that people that say it's green don't get punished by the actions of the red, right? It was supposed to mediate views and delay and cause compromise. But we have a lot more impulse now because the people, for good and for bad, get a much higher say in our government. Okay, that's all I'm trying to really talk about today. I know I went a little bit long. Remember, if you have questions, please submit them. I will try to do a follow-up video if there's anything I need to clarify or anything. Click like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you next time.